Welcome in, college football fans. It's that time again. That's right. It's time for the First and Long College Football Show. We are so glad that you are here. Today, we're going to be talking some Florida State Seminoles football. That's right. Uh, Great year for the Seminoles last year. And so they've landed at number 15 on our list of most intriguing teams headed into the 2024 college football season. As of the day of this video release, we're about 20 days out from kickoff from week one. There going to be some week zero for this team, right, Mason?
That's right.
So yeah, even shorter for you guys versus the rest of the country. All eyes will be on that first game. We're going to break it down here on this video. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're a Florida State fan, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button so all your Florida State fans can hear the good news that we're spreading about your team today. And we've been breaking down tons of teams heading into the season, all the teams that we feel like have a chance to affect the 2024 college football playoff. And we're at number 15, marching our way to number 1. I'm your co-host, Marcus. There's your co-host, Mason. Mason, how are you today? You ready to talk some Seminoles football, brother?
Yes, sir. Doing good. And yeah, like you said, last year was an outstanding year for Florida State. You and I both were on the record saying that we thought that Florida State should have been in the playoffs. Of course, that didn't happen. And then they got blew out by our Georgia Bulldogs, but much different team at that point in the year. They had already kind of hung their hats in a way on a 13-0 season. It was a hell of a year. Top 20 defense, top 20 offense. What more can you say about Florida State? And really the second year in a row that Mike Norvell had strung together so far in having a successful year. The year prior, 2022, 10-2, and then he goes 13-0 the following year. Really impressive, really impressive. And now Florida State is the team to beat in the ACC at this point, and they've kind of taken that crown from the Clemson Tigers and a crown that they had held for several years in the ACC. They were always the ones getting all of the love and all the publicity. Well, now it's Florida State's turn. Rebuilding year this year. We'll break down the roster here in just a minute, but as far as just like an overarching view of the program, you gotta like where Florida State's heading into the 2024 season.
Well, they've climbed their way back into national relevance, Mason. I mean, that's really the kind of the synopsis of what's gone on over the last few years. And Mike Norvell has been the man that's made it happen. We watched this program kind of after a national championship with Jimbo Fisher kind of waller around for a little bit, right? Kind of had a good moment here and there. As though this team has really kind of hit a plane and has really increased the level of play over the last few years. And it's, like I said, due to Mike Norvell turning this program around. He's done a really, really, really good job. This is something that I wanted to kind of start adding into our breakdowns and the recruiting rankings by year. This is really important, guys. And if you want to really look at what has made Florida State successful, or any college football team that's successful in today's modern era, you got to have talent. That's what it boils down to. And Florida State is obviously in a hotbed, but the state of Florida is split up between a lot of teams, and every team in the country goes down there and recruits. So, 2020, number 21 in the country, 21, number 21 in the country, number 22, 23 in the country, 2023, 22 in the country. So you kind of see where this team is recruiting year in and year out. 2024 ended up with a number 12 class, real good class there. Transfer rankings by year, because this team, we have to include that. This team has absolutely attacked the transfer portal over the last few years. In 22, they were number 10, 23, number 6, 24, they were number 7. So top 10 transfer classes every single year. If I've got one bone to pick, Mason, there's no 5 stars coming in, okay? And I'm not saying recruiting rankings are everything, okay? Lad McConkey, perfect example. I'm a Georgia Bulldogs guy, so I'll go with the Georgia Bulldogs fella. Not even hardly recruited at all coming out of high school, right? And he ended up going and playing for the Chargers. He's playing on Sundays. So I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but we do this blue chip ratio type stuff every single off season, to figure out who actually has a chance to win a national championship. And I'm going to give all the respect in the world to the Florida State fans and just go ahead and say, you guys are grading on a scale of a national championship. Okay, that's you made your comeback in the ACC last year, won the ACC. That was a big time goal. But this program grades themselves with the best of the best in the country. And if you're going to win a national championship, I just feel like there needs to be a little bit more talent, high end talent, right? Tons of 4 stars, tons of 3 stars. But guess where Georgia recruits every year? Top 5. Guess where Alabama recruits every year? Top 5, right? Guess where Ohio State recruits every year? Typically top 5. There's a reason for their success. It's talent influx year in and year out from what I think is the high school level. I think that's the way to go. Last year we saw this team kind of quit. It seemed like, literally some of the guys quit before the last game of the year. I feel like they weren't as invested in this team. They've done it again. They went in the transfer portal again. Got the number 7 class, as I said. How do you think this translates all onto the field, Mason? We're kind of early into this transfer portal stuff, right? And I've been kind of waiting for a team like this to talk about this topic. This team has really relied on the transfer portal, and it's worked. It's worked for the most part. What are your thoughts on that? What's better? Is it the high school recruiting? Is it the transfer portal? And I'd love for all you Florida State fans to tell me in the comment section. I'd genuinely would like to know. I don't know the answer to this question. I feel like we don't have a large enough sample size to see what this is going to do to a program long term. What do you think, Mason?
Well, I think it depends on kind of your philosophy. Would you rather have something and try to hold on to it, or would you rather be chasing something constantly that you may or may not end up getting? Right. I hope that kind of makes a little bit of sense there. But if you're recruiting really well, then you've got to re-recruit those players. So you're never not recruiting players anymore in college football. If you get a 5-star in your 2022 class, well, you got to recruit him in 2023. You got to recruit him in 2024, and beyond that if he doesn't go pro. So there's that aspect of it that I think people sometimes fail to realize when you talk about the Georgias, Ohio States, and Alabamas of the world who do such a good job recruiting the high school ranks. And then you have your mercenaries coming over from the transfer portal who, in some cases, you only have to recruit once. You recruit them out of the transfer portal to come to your program, play for a year, maybe 2, and then hopefully go off to the NFL and kind of show your program's development. As far as which is better, I think it's tough to say that the transfer portal route is better at this moment because we haven't seen that model. It's so new now. We haven't seen it lead to a national championship yet, right? If Ole Miss could upset that this year, there are really a few teams. I guess you could say Oregon, although they've really done a pretty good job of recruiting as well, especially lately. They've done a really good job this year in recruiting, but yeah, to me, I think traditionally I would say high school recruiting is better, and then you would like to get those 4 and 5-star guys that you want an opportunity to re-recruit every year. You've already got a foot in the door to re-recruit them every year. And then you add the 4-star guys coming out of the transfer portal to fill, 4 or 5 slots on your roster that you're either missing depth and need some younger talent to back up your starters, or need a plug-and-play starting wide receiver because you just lost 3 of your main receivers in a national championship year, and now you need to go find at least one because you got the talent behind them, but you need some experience, right? That's the model that makes the most sense right now. If things change and if a team is able to get it done through the transfer portal almost alone and win a national championship, then maybe that'll change my mind. But I haven't seen it yet, so I'm going to stick with what I know and say the high school route is the best option as of right now.
And Florida State was a really good team last year. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the transfer portal worked to perfection last year, right? I mean, ended up with a perfect season minus the bowl loss, in which we just talked about. It was in some ways the JV squad out there, right? And then they kind of got thrown out there to the dogs, literally. And Georgia had just gotten beaten by Alabama, was pissed off. Most of their players played, and boy, it was an ugly scene. We got to see what the transfer portal kind of does to teams that don't hit their goals at the end of the year. And I don't think it's necessarily Florida State's fault. It's just, kind of the way the cookie crumbles in today's college football. Let's talk about this offense. Let's jump into it. Alex Atkins, offensive coordinator, and also the O-line coach. He's entering his third season as offensive coordinator. Top 20 scoring offense in 21 and in 23. Last year was number 77 nationally in rush yards per game. That's going to have to get better this year, and we'll talk more about that and how that kind of factors into what this offense is going to look like. But gonna need to have that running game get going a little bit better this year. Number 46 nationally in passing yards per game in 2023. And whenever you look at those two numbers, it kind of doesn't make sense because you say, well, Mark, you just said top 20 scoring offense. This team scored on gash plays a lot and did really, really good in the red zone. Okay. So yards wise, not the most, not running up and down the field necessarily, not throwing it up and down the field necessarily, but they hit you for long plays and, they were very efficient in the red zone. But with all that being said, you bring in DJU. He's back. He's back in the ACC. So I feel like the whole thing you're trying to do on offense changes here, Mason, because I don't think you're relying on DJU to come in and sling the rock around, every single down. That's not happening. That's not what this guy is. Now he does give you a little bit of versatility with his legs, right? You can kind of see the rushing yards there. He had 545 rushing yards in 2022, 308 in 2021. We all know how Clemson likes to, run their quarter. They've stayed doing that. I mean, Cade Klubnik still does that to this day. Trevor Lawrence would run the ball in college. Used to freak me out. I used to always say, man, this guy's going to get hurt. But DJU is a very specific type of quarterback in my eyes. And I'm interested to see how all this works together, Mason. I mean, this isn't a super efficient guy as far as percentage-wise. He's got a great arm, tons of experience, great character. I like the kid a lot. But he just really hasn't panned out to be the 5-star that we thought he would coming out of high school. But it's not too late. He could definitely change my mind this year. What do you think about DJU coming over to Florida State?
Yeah, I think you're getting someone with a ton of experience who knows kind of the ins and outs, the daily rigors of practice, camp, things like that. Brings a lot of leadership to this quarterback room. I don't think that Brock Glenn was ready for his position last year. He was kind of thrown into the fire. What true freshman quarterback would be? So yeah, you add that experience into the room, and I think that you've got someone who's got big play potential in DJU. He throws a great deep ball. He's 43% on passes, 20 plus yards down the field. But he's also a career, 59% completion percentage overall type of quarterback. So I don't know if you say we know what we're getting at 59%, or you say maybe we can get the best of him this year and this last year. There's nowhere to run at this point. His back's against the wall. He's got to perform this year if he wants to keep playing and play into the NFL. This is the year that he's got to put it all together. A lot's riding on his shoulders, but at the end of the day, is Florida State a national championship team in your eyes? I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. So how much pressure is really on DJU. I know within the program they should be feeling like they could win a national championship regardless of the turnover and things like that. But as an outsider, I can say I don't really have them picked to be a national championship contender. I think they're a French playoff team this year, but so in that case, I think you're looking at DJU and saying, can he perform at the highest level that we've seen him perform at in the college ranks more consistently? Or are we going to get more of the same? If it's more of the same, I don't think they're making the playoffs. I think if DJU can perform in a way that we thought that he would, really his freshman year was the first year that or the last year that we saw, peak DJU and what we could project him to be as an NFL quarterback. But if he returns kind of back to that ceiling that we know that he's capable of, I think this could be a playoff team. And so in that sense, yeah, I guess there's a lot of pressure on DJU.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like there is a lot of pressure on him because this offense is going to need a big time playmaker, Mason, and that is one thing that I do like about DJU. You did nail that. His ability on vertical passes down the field, I really like. His deep ball is beautiful. It's the intermediate stuff that what is kind of questionable. And to be honest with you, Mason, separately, this Florida State team last year, I felt like kind of struggled with the intermediate stuff. It seemed like it was all or nothing in the passing game. It was tons of 50-50 balls. And I understand why they were doing that. Keon Coleman out there, right? But I don't think there's no Keon Coleman out there this year, I don't think. Now, I'm not saying there ain't some good receivers. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a couple of them for sure. Some of them with some really good upside that it might just be unrealized at this point. But I don't know. I feel like you're going to have a couple of different pitches, right? If you're DJU this year, you can't just throw the fastball, man. You're going to have to have a curve. You're going to have a change. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have more than one trick in the bag. And a big part of this offense's success in 2024 is going to be on the backs of these running backs. Okay. Got to be able to run the ball effectively. Last year just was not going to get it. Okay. Whatever that we did last year running the football, it's not going to work this year. Got to be better. 77 in the country in yards per game rushing, not going to get it. You got some good. I think you got two really good ones. And then I think you got three that provide some really good depth. So I think you got five solid running backs. Lawrence Stafili is back. 463 yards rushing last year, averaged 6.7 yards per carry. That'll get her done. If you can get a little more of that, that would be great. You get Binky Williams coming over from Alabama. I call him Binky because he likes to wear a binky out on the field. I think Nick Saban actually put a stop to that. He transfers over from Alabama. He stopped wearing the binky. He's at Florida State. He might bring the binky back. I don't know, Mason. 1,165 yards in 4 years at Alabama. He's got some experience. He knows what a really good team looks like. But he was running behind one of the best offensive lines in the country at Alabama. So I'm interested to see, this is a good line too. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know if they're that caliber. I'm interested to see how this translates. I think he's going to get crack at the first string job. And then you got Jalen Lucas coming over from Indiana. You got Keziah Holmes. It's a holdover from last year. And then a guy to really look out for, Cam Davis, freshman. He's not pictured on this slide here, but making a lot of noise in the spring. Sounds like Cam Davis may be able to contribute to this running back room as well. What do you think about the running back room for Florida State?
I think it's really deep. I think this is the deepest unit on the offense. You've got five guys that I feel pretty confident in that I would want to see. I would be excited for as a Florida State fan to see any of these five guys get an opportunity to tote the rock for me this year. Really like Toafili. I've always liked him. I think he deserves the starting role. But if you're giving him 40% of the carries and Roydell Williams getting 60%, I know it's not going to work out that way, but as a two-headed monster, if he's getting 2/3 of the carries or something like that, that would be that would still be an uptick for Toafili, and I think he's going to produce. I really like what he brings. He's kind of a similar back to Roy Dale Williams, though. I think you got two of the same type of running backs there, and then Jalen Lucas kind of adds that quick shiftiness and that change of pace. That different sort of look from the running back position, the lightning to the thunder, so to speak, and I think that you've got a good mix of dudes and five guys that, like I said, I would feel pretty comfortable with if they were on my team.
Yeah. Going to rely on this running back room a lot. I can't overstate that. It's got to be better, and I think that it will be. And Norvell uses multiple running backs very well, so I think you're going to see a healthy rotation of guys, keeping everybody fresh. Definitely running back by committee, but definitely deep enough to get it done. Let's go over to pass catchers. Excuse me. Ja'Kai Douglas coming back. Hakeem Williams coming back. Kyle Morlock coming back. These are not pieces that just have tons and tons of yards or anything, Mason, but they're guys that have potential, right? These are highly recruited guys. Kyle Morlock is a pretty good tight end. He's not a wide receiver. He's a tight end. But the other notable additions are the ones that are interesting to me. I know these guys are going to be decent. They've got enough of a spread for me to look at and say, okay, these guys can produce at least, maybe not be like a wide receiver one necessarily, but I think it's a good by committee room there that pictured. The ones that really interest me, Jaylen Brown, Malik Benson. What can those two guys do? Because I think that's going to be kind of the catalyst. I mean, not the catalyst. If this room exceeds expectations, it's going to be because Jaylen Brown and Malik Benson exceeded expectations, right? These are really highly sought after guys, but they came from LSU and Alabama. And you don't just go step on the field at LSU right now as a wide receiver. And newsflash, they're kind of like wide receiver U for the South right now. Alabama, you know what it takes to get on the field there. You got to be one of the best college football players in the world, right? So those guys leaving from the schools doesn't make me shudder at all. But now I got to see their potential actually realized out there on the field. But I think they have the potential to do it. The floor is low, I think, for this wide receiver room, though, Mason. I think there is a chance that it could not work out very well. But I think the ceiling is really high, if that makes any sense. I think it's kind of wide open of what you're going to get out of this wide receiver room, and I really don't know what to make of it at this point. What do you think about the wide receivers coming into 24?
I may be a little bit more optimistic than you. I do think that Hakeem Williams is a guy who has potential to be that wide receiver one for Florida State. He's a true sophomore, got like 5 catches last year, 80 yards, whatever. Stuck behind Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, right? That's kind of what we saw from Hakeem Williams. I think that I haven't heard anything about camp yet. I don't know what sort of state he's in or how he's been progressing in his second season or second off season. But if he steps up and is doing what he needs to do in camp, I think he has the talent at 6'2", good frame to be that wide receiver one. He's just got to do it. This was a guy, we mentioned 5 stars at the beginning of the show. This was a former 5-star that I think lost his 5-star late, but was a top 50 overall player. So very high ceiling guy coming out of high school. Malik Benson, comes over from Alabama, but before Alabama, he was actually in the JUCO ranks and had 2 seasons in junior college, put up over 20 touchdowns, over 2,000 yards in those 2 seasons. So somebody who has a lot of talent and also ran a 10.400 meter in high school. Super fast guy at 5'11", or excuse me, at 6. I think he was at 6 or 6'1". So pretty good size for a receiver. I do have faith in him to be able to produce here at Florida State. Probably just got buried on the depth chart there at Alabama. A little bit suspect that he's at his third school at this point, but obviously, he worked his way up in the JUCO ranks, became one of the best receivers in JUCO, tried his luck at Alabama. Things didn't pan out. Now he's looking for his third home. I mean, not too much to draw from the moving, I think, for the most part. Then another guy that you mentioned, Landon Thomas, he's another weapon, I think, at tight end. True freshman coming in. He was the number one tight end coming out of high school for the longest time. Eventually lost his fifth star as well, by some recruiting services at least. And but he's a guy who is going to make an impact right away. I like what Kyle Morlock does, but I think that Landon Thomas gives the Florida State offense the opportunity to run that two tight end set. I think we're going to see a pretty good bit of that this year as well. And then you've got two pass catching weapons on the perimeter there, who can also come down and block. Really like the tight end room overall. Jackson West is a guy who comes down and blocks well as Brian Courtney. So you've got a good mix of blocking ability and pass catching ability in those two tight end slots whenever they do go 12 personnel or something like that as far as the offense goes. But I think overall, I mean, looking at wide receiver and tight ends as a whole, I mean, I'd give them a B plus. I think they're going to be in pretty good shape. It's not elite, but and it's also not very deep. That's one thing I noticed with the wide receiver core. I mean, you've really only got about 8 guys at receiver. And so, and then you couple that with, 4 tight ends. Not sure what they're going to bring in this fall as far as freshmen go. But, as of right now, going through spring camp at least, I think that they're a little bit thin in the pass catching positions. But I do think that they have, like with you, there is a range of possibilities in what could happen with this receiving group. But ultimately, if they hit, I think that they could be pretty dang high.
Yeah, I think so. It's gonna be interesting to see how the passing game evolves from last year. As I spoke earlier, you had Keon Coleman, you were throwing 50-50 balls to. Who's that guy? I want to know who's that guy on this team, and I don't know that we're gonna get that answer until the season gets going. I would think early in the season you're going to be relying on the run game, right? I would think that's what you're probably going to be trying to do. We're gonna look at the schedule here in just a few minutes. Kind of so on the schedule. That first game is going to be tricky. We'll talk about it here in a few minutes. Let's talk about this offensive line. This should be a really solid unit come fall time. Even with some new starters, tackles Darius Washington has got 10 starts, and Jeremiah Byers has got 14 starts. They're going to be your bookend tackles. You get a transfer, TJ Ferguson coming over from Alabama, and Richie Leonard coming over from Florida. They're gonna give you some depth there at guard. You got Maury Smith back at center. So you got Keandre Jones and Robert Scott have got some starting experience. This should be a really good group, honestly, Mason, for all intents and purposes. You add a little depth through the transfer portal, but you bring back several starters. What was that? Was it 4? 4 starters, 3 starters from last year on that offensive line. You'll take that, right? On an offense where you're only bringing back 20-something percent total, 24%. You can bring back 3 starters on offensive line. I think that's a good place to bring back some production, and I think they're going to be in good shape on the offensive line. I'm not too much worried about the O-line here.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 7, 8 guys with starting experience. Yeah, I think you take that. You've got some rotational pieces. Not sure what's going to go on at the guard positions. I think you're solidified at right tackle, left tackle, and center. And if you're going to be shored up in any positions on the O-line, that's where you want to have your set starters at. Those are definitely the 3 most important positions. But you've got 2, I think, really good transfers coming in for offensive line transfers, which you don't get many of. I think you got two of the better ones in TJ Ferguson and Richie Leonard. Richie Leonard was a top 50 recruit, or excuse me, a top top 100 recruit, top 75 recruit coming out of high school overall, and a guy who was actually one of the better offensive linemen on the Florida roster. So it's got to hurt Florida fans to have a player transfer to their rival, which,
No
hey, as
kidding.
Georgia fans, we have a common enemy, Florida State. So we love to see that, actually. But yeah, so totally non-biased show, by the way, y'all. But but yeah, ultimately you've got 8 guys who can play on this offensive line. I think you're going to need all 8 guys at some point in the season. This is a tough position to play in the trenches. You're going to have guys go down with injury, and you've got to have the versatility there to back them up. And I think that's what you've got, especially when you look at a guy like Darius Washington, who played center, right tackle, and left tackle last year, and was only given up 1 sack, or had only given up 1 sack all season. He's a first team All ACC as well, and only 7 quarterback hurries. That's true versatility there. You play 3 positions and you're still first team All ACC. Only giving up single digit quarterback hurries throughout the whole season. That's really impressive. And I think him, along with Jeremiah Byers, you've got 2 bookends there at the tackle position that are going to lead this unit and be pretty successful, I think.
How can they run block, Mason? How can they run block? That's going to be the big question. 76 nationally last year running the football. Going to have to be better this year if you want a smooth transition for DJ Uiagalelei. There's your offensive depth chart. Take a picture, love it, like it, hate it. I don't care what you do, but that's what it looks like right now. There's a lot of guys gone, Mason. There's a lot of question marks here on this offense. But I like that they're, just to kind of put a cap on this, I like that there is some consistency with coaching. At least you're not having a brand new coach coming in, installing a whole new system. You trust that some of these guys have picked some of this stuff up as rotational players or practice players. So there at least is some continuity amongst the coaching staff at this program, and that does tend to help out whenever you're only bringing back 24% production on offense. Let's jump over to defense, Mason. You got a guy named Adam Fuller. I feel like Adam Fuller doesn't ever get talked about. So he got a whole slide. He got a whole ass slide here on the First and Long College Football Show. 5th season as a defensive coordinator, top 25 scoring defense in 22 and 23. 6th in the FBS in opponent third down conversion allowed last year, 29%. That is outstanding. You're going to have success in college football if you can only allow 29% first downs on whenever you get opponent to third. That's a big deal. If that can continue, that's going to help this team out a lot. 72nd yards per game rushing allowed in 2023, 152. Going to be hard to improve on that this year. We're going to talk about the defensive line here in a minute, but it is sparse. 11th in yards per game passing allowed in 2023, very solid. Let's talk about some of the guys that are coming back. DJ Lundy coming back, 64 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 4 pass deflections, and an interception last year. This guy's going to bring a whole lot of leadership to that linebacker room. You bring back safety, Shaheem Brown. You bring back cornerback Fentrell Cypress, who is absolutely ridiculous. Very good. 8 pass deflections last year. That is outstanding. You bring a couple guys back on the defensive line, Patrick Payton, Joshua Farmer. Each of those guys have got some experience. Look, you got to kind of match this up with the portal additions as well. Okay. And we'll kind of start with defensive line, Mason, but you add Marvin Jones to that edge spot. You bring back a couple of guys. You bring in Grady Kelly, defensive lineman from Colorado State. A lot of questions, Mason, on this defensive line. What's your take on what they've brought in? What do you think about the D-line as it sits now?
Well, I like what they have kind of up front. here with this unit. In the middle, I should say, not up front. They're all up front, right? But Joshua Farmer, I think, leads the guys at defensive tackle. 10 quarterback hurries last year. Second team All ACC, 5 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss on 32 tackles. I'm a little bit worried about the depth behind that, but behind him, you know, you got KJ Sampson, who's going into his second year. And then, you know, you've got to fill another defensive tackle position based on the scheme that they run. That's going to be filled by Daryl Jackson Jr., who's kind of just a jag, you know, a jag.
Yeah, been
just a
hurt.
guy. Yeah. And then you bring in a transfer in Grady Kelly. So I don't really know what you're going to make out of the interior of this defensive line, but I do like Joshua Farmer. I think he's gonna need to be a 3-down player there at defensive tackle for Florida State this year. But one of the things that Adam Fuller does so well is brings in defensive end talent through the transfer portal. Probably better than any coach in the transfer portal era has so far. He brings in a guy like Sione Lolea. I think I said that right, but
sounded like you nailed it.
I think so. It just kind of rolled off. I thought I would struggle with that, you know, pre-show, but anyways, he comes over from Oregon State and had 47 tackles last year, 8.5 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks, 27 quarterback hurries, 21 run stops. Plays the pass well, plays the run well, extremely disruptive. Actually probably didn't get enough talk this offseason in this transfer, because I think that this guy's extremely productive and extremely disruptive. Watch him on film. Don't take my word for it. Go watch him. He's really fun to watch. And another guy that's fun to watch is Marvin Jones Jr., who's another transfer, comes over from Georgia. Legacy player for Florida State, kind of coming home in a sense, and really reminds you of another Georgia transfer, Jermaine Johnson, who also transferred to Florida State and ended up becoming a first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
I think he's got top-end talent. Never really lived up to his 5-star billing that he came out of high school with, but, you know, played at Georgia, and Georgia runs a different system where they are constantly rotating in and out on the defensive line, and you know, in particular on the defensive line, really the front seven as a whole. And so I think he never really put up those stats, but coming over to Florida State, Jermaine Johnson, you know, he never put up those stats before moving over to Florida State, where he could kind of get the bulk of those snaps and statistics, you know, because of the increase in snaps there. But really excited to see what both of those players are going to be able to do at the defensive end spot. They do return Patrick Payton. He's coming in for his 4th season in college. Had 44 tackles last year, 14.5 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks, 32 quarterback hurries. I think they're going to be really good on the edge, Mark, and I like what they have. I know we're going to get into the linebacker core here in just a minute, but you can kind of mask with one good piece at defensive tackle. I think you can mask the other one when you've got 2 guys on the edge that are really just, you know, wreaking havoc, and then you back them up on the second level of the defense with some good linebacker play. But that's kind of my assessment of the defensive line for now. What else you got on the D line?
That's all. I mean, you got some guys coming in. You got the boy coming in from West Virginia. He was a freshman last year, had 6 tackles for loss. Tomiwa Duroje, I think I nailed it. He comes over from Morgantown. He's going to come help supplement this defensive line. Look, this is what I'm worried about with the defense. I have to just be completely frank and honest with you. I feel pretty good about linebacker. Edge position, I kind of consider that a linebacker. I feel like really everybody runs like a 3-4, but they just, whether or not you put that linebacker there down on the line or not, whatever. That's a linebacker in my eyes. I feel good about the linebacker position. I feel really good about the secondary, especially the starting guys. I'm not so sure about necessarily the second and third string, but I mean, you can say that about a lot of teams, right, Mason? I mean, but this team, I think, is going to be a little bit susceptible up front, and going to need some guys to step up for sure. Let's talk about those linebackers, Mason. You bring back DJ Lundy, as I said before, 64 tackles, 6 tackles for loss last year. That's gonna really help this linebacker room. He brings a lot of swagger and experience to the group. Third on the team in tackles last season. Um, Sophomores Blake Nicholson and Omar Graham. They flashed as freshmen and maybe relied upon more this season. They definitely will be after the departures that this team has had. Sean Murphy comes over from Alabama. Cam Riley over from Auburn. They'll get a lot of work in the rotation. So you got dudes. I don't have a ton of concerns about linebacker. Mike Norvell's got a great record of taking care of that position, as you've stated already. I think he's done it again. I think they're going to be in pretty good shape. What's your take on the linebackers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with DJ Lundy, one of the leaders on this defense. 3.4% missed tackle rate last year with 24 run stops. Really good in the for. I mean, if you're in single digits in run stop rate or missed tackle rate, I think you're in pretty good shape as a defender, especially at the linebacking position. But yeah, I really like what he's going to do as a leader. I think you're going to see some interplay between Omar Graham, Blake Nicholson, and Sean Murphy as well for that second linebacker position. But the good news is you got 3 guys who are kind of battling for that position, and so I feel pretty good that at least one of those one of those 3 will step up and play comparable to DJ Lundy and be another one of the leaders in the middle of this defense.
Yeah, you got a good mix of old guys, experience, and young talent, and I feel like that's always a really good recipe. And not only is it a good recipe for your current season, but it helps definitely build up those younger guys for years to come for sure. Um, how about the secondary, Mason? I feel really good about the secondary. Um, Deep defensive backfield, led by 2 of the top corners in the ACC. We already mentioned Fentrell Cypress. I think he's an absolute dog. Azare Thomas. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting name there. Mr. Thomas is really good. The duo combined for 69 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 18 pass breakups. That's a ton. And 2 forced fumbles last season. That's a really good nucleus to build your secondary around. And then you bring in guys like Omarion Cooper. After he spent a season in Boulder, it looks like he'll be, helping out at the nickel position a little bit. You got Earl Little Jr. that came over from Alabama. So they'll kind of be battling it out there. But I don't have a ton of concern for this group. I think that they're going to be in pretty good shape. The only thing that does concern me is the defensive line and if those linebackers can't get pressure, right?
Yeah.
That's when you're in trouble. And it doesn't matter as much how awesome the guys are that you got out there. If a quarterback's got 5 or 6 seconds to throw it, it's trouble. It's trouble for a secondary. So those guys in the back are really kind of counting on those guys in the front 7 of this defense to be able to get some havoc plays, get after the quarterback. If they can do that, I think the secondary is going to be just fine. What do you think?
Yeah, and if they're not getting it done up front, then maybe you just send one of those great defensive backs up and make them have them cause some wreak some havoc, I guess. And when we're talking about havoc plays, I think you got to look at the buck position in Shaheem Brown, who plays that buck or that safety position, kind of that strong safety position there. And had 54 tackles last year, 2 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks, 4 pass breakups, 1 interception, and was a 10% missed tackle rate. Was really just disruptive for a safety, and had some plays that he just kind of made. He's kind of a playmaker there. So look to see him get a little bit more involved on some blitzes and things like that potentially. And then, I mean, the cornerbacks, I don't know if there's a better cornerback duo in college football. I mean, these 2 guys are absolutely elite. Cypress, had 40 tackles, 8 pass breakups, like you mentioned, 50% completion when targeted. And then Azari Thomas is even better. He had 10 pass breakups, 48% completion when targeted, and very well could be the best cornerback in the country. He's up there with Johnson from Michigan. Definitely a top 20 type of cornerback here. So I'm really high on the cornerbacks. I think it's going to be really tough for any team to throw on the outside, and then you bring in Earl Little Jr., who came in from Alabama and apparently just told everybody to get the hell out of the way because I'm starting at nickelback, and ran some people off. I mean, he was just an absolute stud coming in. So I really that's 4 of the 5 positions right there that I'm really high on. Devontae Brown comes over to play free safety as a transfer. I don't know if it's a good thing that he's starting right away. I honestly, I don't know much about Devontae Brown. I didn't really see him play much last season, but it looks like he's kind of getting that position. And, I think that says more about the talent at the position than it does him as a player. And I'm a little bit concerned about that free safety position, but if that's the only position of the 5 that you have to worry about, at least when it comes to the starters, then I think that's a really good secondary. And I do feel strongly about this secondary being really good.
Lots of depth brought in through the transfer portal for this team. And it'll be interesting to see how many of those guys make their way to that starting lineup, as you said, Mason. That'll be interesting to watch as the season goes on for sure. Let us know in the comment section which transfer guy that you're most excited about on this defense. Somebody other than Marvin Jones Jr., right? I think everybody can agree that he's got tons of upside, but I'm interested about the rest of these guys and who you guys are excited about. I bet a bunch of you would say Earl Little Jr., but we'll see how it pans out this year. I think these guys are going to contribute a lot on the defense. Let's talk the schedule, man. This is always one of my favorite parts of these breakdowns, and you start off the season about a week before everybody else. You go out to, wasn't it in Ireland, Mason?
Mm-hmm. Dublin, Ireland.
Dublin, Ireland. How about that? August 24th, you'll be playing Georgia Tech. Better be ready to play some football because Georgia Tech will be ready to play some football. They're pretty fired up. Look, we live in Georgia, and we have to listen to bullcrap about Georgia Tech all the time on sports radio, blah, blah, blah. They over there running their mouth. All right. They've been talking about they hate everything about Georgia, blah, blah. And I know you don't care about that, Florida State fans, but Georgia Tech's kind of feeling themselves right now. Okay. And they've gained a little bit of momentum. They played Georgia really close at the end of the year last year. Kind of made Georgia fans feel a little tight in their pants, just kind of a little close for comfort. And I'm telling you, I feel like this team has got a little bit of momentum. You better be ready to play week 1 because Georgia Tech could come out and shock the world. Now, I'm not predicting that, but Florida State better be ready to run the football and run it effectively. And DJU, it better be on his P's and Q's for sure. Boston College, Memphis, Cal, SMU. We've done an SMU breakdown, Mason. They're going to be a decent little team. You end up getting that game at SMU. That'll be your first time going to that stadium since they've joined the ACC. That'll be really interesting. And then you've got to turn around and host Clemson. Mike Norvell's 1-2 against Clemson. Won last year on a really crazy defensive play there at the end of the game. What do you think about those first 6 games? I think they've got a shot to win every one of those games, and probably will be favored in every single one of them, right?
Yeah. I don't know about Clemson. We'll have to see by the time that game rolls around how Clemson's kind of feeling. They'll probably have a loss to Georgia at that point, and it could have 2 losses at that point.
If you watched our Clemson breakdown, I think I picked them to have like 2 or 3 by that point.
Right. So I'm kind of curious about that game. I think that on paper, Clemson has a little bit more of a balanced team, but there are more playmakers on the Florida State roster that could take the game over. But when I'm looking at the first 6 games of the schedule, I'm circling Clemson, SMU, and Georgia Tech, like you mentioned, and I'm wondering if you can get two of those three, get a win in two of those three games. I'm not worried about the other three. I think that after 6 weeks, you're looking at being 5-1. Realistically, because look, weird things happen over in Ireland. I actually really enjoy watching those games because it's a kickoff to the season, but also they get a little weird, and it's fun to see some football being played overseas and all that.
It's funny,
yeah, Georgia Tech,
the fans in those games never know like when to cheer. I
right?
think it's hilarious. They're always just like, yeah, and it's just like that was a hold,
Right,
like
right.
they never know. It is a funky crowd. It's like that whenever NFL goes to London, all Mexico, all that. Everybody's there spectating, wanting to see something American, but not everybody knows what's going on. But I agree that some weird stuff happens out there.
That's right. So, but yeah, ultimately, I think you're going to get two out of those three, and I feel pretty good about that. I think you're 5-1 after the first 6 games. Then you're going to go to Duke, to Miami, and then you get North Carolina at home. Got to go to Notre Dame, Charleston Southern at home, obviously, and then Florida at home. I count one for sure win out of those 6, right? I feel really good about North Carolina. I feel really good about Duke. There's still 3 there, so Miami, Notre Dame, and Florida. Florida is going to be, basically paying teams to beat them. They're going to be searching for some wins on their schedule. They've got a tough little stretch there, including Florida State. But out of those 3, let's just assume that they're going to beat Charleston Southern, North Carolina, and Duke. I feel pretty good about those 3 games, but definitely 2 of those they could lose. So then with the other 3, I'm also gonna split right there. Except I would say that they end up losing 2 of those 3. I don't know which 2 it's going to be, but I'm picking Florida State to go 9-3 this year. I think Miami's going to be a step up from where they were last season. I think Notre Dame as well is going to be a step up from where they were last season. And I know that Florida has gotten better. I'm wondering about the state of Florida by the end of the year. If they've already got 7 losses at that point. I mean, what type of Florida team are you getting? So maybe that's an easy win right there. But Miami and Notre Dame at that point, if you could split those 2, then you're sitting at 10-2 and looking at the playoffs again. Maybe the first team on the outside looking in of the playoffs at 10-2 in the ACC. I don't know if that's enough to get it done, even in a 12-team format. But yeah, that's to me that's where this team's going to rest at about 9-3, 10-2. Maybe as low as 8-4. I think some things could really slide and not go in their favor. If they lose week 1, I think it's probably an 8-4 team for Florida State by the end of the year. But yeah, that's kind of my range, 8-10 wins. I don't think this is a playoff team by the end of the year personally. I don't think that they're going to have the firepower on offense. Defense is going to be pretty good, in my opinion. I think that they're going to need to be holding teams to around 17 points though, for this offense to get it done in those bigger games, because this isn't a very easy schedule for the ACC. I think they've got a pretty tough one here in front of them.
Yeah, and it's backloaded, and sometimes that can cause some issues for you. With having a new quarterback though, maybe it'll help them get their feet wet. All right, here's my predictions. Lost to SMU, beat Clemson. So you lose one to a team you probably shouldn't lose to, and then you beat a team that maybe you shouldn't beat. I think maybe you should, but nonetheless, I'm picking that SMU game as a loss. I think you go into SMU and they have got something that they want to prove to the world. And then I think Miami's a loss. I think Notre Dame's a loss. And I think 9-3 is where you end up. I think you're dead right, Mason. I think you're dead on. I think this team's got a pretty decent chance they end up 8-4, but I think the most reasonable would be 9-3 in the ACC for 2024. Florida State fans, we'd love to hear how wrong we are. You can tell us that in the comment section. We would love to hear it. And we would love to have you come hang out with us on the First and Long College Football Show, first and foremost. We're going to have live shows throughout the season. We're going to have reaction shows to everything that we see on these crazy Saturdays. And boy, it's going to be one crazy year. We have prediction shows that we do earlier in the week. We've got a betting show that we do once a week during the season. That's my personal favorite. Between the Lines is what it's called. Really good show there if you like to throw some money down on the college football teams. We'd love to have you come join us. We hope that you'll consider hitting that subscribe button. Best of luck to the Seminoles in 2024. For Seminoles fans, I hope you win an ACC championship. It wouldn't bother me a bit to see Florida State win an ACC championship and end up in the college football playoffs. Thank you so much for watching. Signing out for First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. You have a great day.